This is a love story with a difference. It's about a man who couldn't wait to get home and spend time with a woman he adored. The only difference was she'd been dead for 9 years. This incredible story took place in Key West, Florida in the 1930s. Carl von Kussel was an X-ray technician. Elena Hoyas was his patient, a pretty 19-year-old undergoing treatment for TB. Although Carl was 62, they soon became good friends. Elena saw him as a father figure. The friendship was cut short when Elena passed away. The distraught Carl persuaded Elena's family to allow him to provide a mausoleum for her. Elena's crypt was built here in Key West Cemetery, and Carl visited her every day. But what saddened him most was how her corpse was slowly decomposing. He had to preserve her beauty, but he couldn't do it here. So the next time Carl visited the tomb, he gave somebody a lift home, and you can guess who that body was. Sitting next to Carl in the passenger seat was the decaying body of Elena Hoyas. Reaching his house, Carl laid her out on his bed. She would remain here for 7 years. But in 1940, one of Elena's sisters dreamed that Elena's body had been removed from the crypt. Police broke in. Her body was missing, and their number one suspect was Carl. They raced round to his house to question him, but they weren't prepared for the ghoulish sight that greeted them. This is Elena's mummified body. Each day Carl talked to her, dressed her in fine clothes. He even serenaded her on a pipe organ. And each night he would lay down next to her putrefying body. Elena's corpse was placed in this hearse. The undertakers, though, were not impressed by Carl's amateur embalming. Although he'd preserved her face using layer upon layer of beeswax, the rest of her body had rotted away. What little skin remained was bound to the bones with fabric and plaster of Paris. The corpse was then driven to this nearby funeral home where over 2,000 locals filed past it in amazement and disbelief. In Key West, curiosity and sympathy for Carl outweighed any outrage. Bizarre as it may seem, the public was sympathetic when he stood trial for vandalism and disturbing a grave. After a lengthy hearing, all charges against Carl were dismissed, and he was allowed to return home without Elena's body, which was reburied in an unmarked grave. That's almost the end of the story, except that in 1945, Elena's original crypt was destroyed by a mysterious explosion. No one knew if it was the work of Carl. 40 years later, Key West residents still talk about it.
She was a pretty girl. I think that's why he got attached to her. They took her down to the funeral parlor, and that's where I saw her all waxed up, you know.
He had dressed her in a Japanese silky.
He did good work on her.
And what about Carl? Well, he moved from Key West and died sad and alone in 1952 in the town of Zeffirilla. When police found his body, it was in an advanced state of decay, just like the love of his life, poor, pretty Elena Hoyas. It's a pity nobody cared for Carl as much as he cared for her.